Fireside. Today we're going to continue our conversation on spiritual warfare, but before we do that, I have a confession to make. When I was younger, I used to love terrorizing my sister, just a little bit. I used to love startling her. So I would find a spot, maybe it was a table or a chair or a door, and I would hide, and I'd wait for her to pass by in the house, and I'd jump out, I'd startle her. She would jump 10 feet in the air, and she'd scream, not quite cry, but I thought that was hilarious as an older brother. But there was one day when I decided I need something more effective. I decided to hide in her room. So I went into her room when she wasn't there, and I hid behind the door, between the door and the wall, and I waited very still until she came in and she got on her bed, she got comfortable, and she was happy. She was getting ready for bed, and I jumped out and I scared her. I scared her really well this time, actually. In fact, I scared her too much, and my parents are laughing because they remember this. Because my now sobbing and traumatized sister prompted my parents to tell me that this game was not allowed anymore. And the reason that this was so effective, that the scaring was so great, was because I had attacked her in a place that was safe and that was comfortable. And this fact remains true for any attack. Most attacks that are super effective take us by surprise, and they get us somewhere where we're comfortable, where we feel safe. And as Christians, that is often in the church. We feel safe and we feel comfortable in the church. And that is exactly where Satan is going to try to attack us the most, because attacks in the church have the greatest effect. And a lot of us probably know this. There's probably a lot of us in this room that have been attacked in a church or even by the church. And that's really tough. That's really hard to grapple with. How can we be in a church that should be safe, that should be comfortable, that should be full of believers, but still we get attacked? But we need to remember that this is spiritual war, and that the person doing the attacking is not the people around us, but it's Satan who's using those people. So, Fireside, the question we have today is, how does Satan attack the church? And as much as we don't want this to be the case, we have to know that he will attack the church. That much we know. So how does he do it? And thankfully, Paul gives us the answer. Today we're going to be in the book of Romans. So if you want to open up your Bibles, we're going to be in Romans chapter 16, starting in verse 17. It'll also be up on the screen in a minute. It's important first to know a little bit about the book of Romans. We call it a book, like you might read it, but in reality, Paul, when he wrote it, was writing a letter. He was writing this letter to the church in Rome. He was writing it to the Roman believers. And he wanted to give them some important teachings on the doctrine of Christianity, telling them what isn't Christianity, what is supposed to be a part of your Christian walk. So he wrote this letter to them, and where we're going to pick up in a minute is the very end of his letter, where he gives them three things. He gives them a warning, he gives them instructions, and a promise of hope. So, starting in verse 17 of chapter 16, Paul says, I appeal to you, brothers, to watch out for those who cause divisions, create obstacles contrary to the teaching that you have received. Avoid them. He literally says, lean away from them. For such persons do not serve our Lord Christ, but their own appetites. Literally, he says, their own empty bellies, their desires. And by smooth talk and flattery, they deceive the hearts of the naive. the people who don't know better. For your obedience is known to all, so that I rejoice over you. Good job, Romans. You're doing the right thing. But I want you to be wise to what is good and innocent to what is evil. Wise to know what is good and innocent as to what is evil. Avoid doing evil. Paul gives us 3 specific words. He gives us divisions, obstacles, and deceive. These 3 words happen to be the exact battle plan of the enemy against the church. So how does Satan attack the church? He will divide, divert, and deceive us. This is his plan. But it's also really important to notice what Paul says about who is going to carry out the attack. Paul doesn't say in verse 17, watch out for the devil who causes divisions and creates obstacles. He says, watch out for those. Watch out for the people who create divisions and put up obstacles. Paul is telling us that the attacks on the church are going to come from inside the church. This is awful news. This is terrible to hear about. But Paul tells us who these people will be specifically. They're people who serve, going the other way, their own appetites. Specifically, the people who serve their own appetites will be carrying out these attacks. And so, we're now going to look at how they do those things. Because as you serve your own appetites, as people serve their own desires, and they're not serving Christ, they necessarily will be serving the devil. And they'll be doing exactly what he wants in the church. And that starts with division. The first thing that we're going to see from these people serving their desires is that they will take people and they'll divide them up. They'll make them separated from each other. Because Satan wants a fractured church. He doesn't want them to be united. That makes it harder for him to attack the church. And we're going to see these divisions in 2 ways. The first one is that people who serve their own desires are going to disagree with people who serve Christ. There's no way for them to really get along or agree on anything, because if you serve your own desires, you're necessarily selfish. You want what you want, and you want it for yourself. But if you serve Christ, you want to be selfless. You want to give of yourself. You want to help other people, and you want to worship God. So naturally, there will be a division between wanting to serve yourself and serving Christ. That's the first way. The second way we'll see this division is when people who serve their own desires, their own appetites, disagree with other people who serve their own desires and their own appetites. And this one is like when you have one dog treat, one dog bone, and 2 dogs in front of you. They just nip at each other, they fight, they growl, and they try and assert dominance over one another, and they lunge at the food because they want this. They want the dog treat. And it's the same for the 2 groups of people who serve their appetites. They don't want to serve each other or serve Christ. They want to just serve themselves. And as these divisions start separating people more and more and more, the devil is able to grab onto one little group at a time. He's able to latch onto this group over here, and then this one. And he's able to slowly divert them. And this word divert is not the word that Paul uses. I'm aware of that. So let's look at an image here. The word divert means to change the direction something is moving. And in this image, we see this water is moving this direction first. only one direction, and then it hits this red wall, this obstacle, and that's the word that Paul uses, and when it hits the obstacle, it starts moving another direction. So the obstacles will divert us as believers. This is the second step, because once people begin serving their own desires in the church, they'll want to continue serving their own desires. Paul tells us that these obstacles, these diversions, are going to be contrary to the teaching we have received. They're going to be opposite from what it means to follow Christ or to serve Christ. There's going to be diversions, these obstacles, that cause us to change our direction from serving Christ to serving ourselves. And we're going to see this because the people who serve their own appetites are going to twist what the teachings say, what the rules are, so they continue serving themselves. On one hand, you're going to see a camp of people who use the rules to force the church to do something, who use the rules to condemn other people, who use the rules to make themselves puffed up, to make themselves self-righteous. And that's how they feed their appetite. And on the other hand, you'll find people who ignore the rules, who decide the rules aren't helpful because they like feeding their appetites on sinful things, and the rules get in the way of that. And in both cases, both the self-righteous person and the person who's trying to make their unrighteousness okay, they'll justify it. They use smooth talk and flattery to make it seem like their tyrannical behavior or their ungodly behavior is justified. This is dangerous because it sounds really good to us. And this sounding good, this thing that allows people to be self-righteous or to continue on in sin, this is the last step. Deception. Satan's ultimate goal with the church is to deceive them into serving themselves. The people who want to serve their own appetites are not going to be comfortable in a church that asks them to sacrifice something or to give of themselves. So they are going to try to find any way possible to make the church a place where they can take, where they can remain selfish. And this is why Satan sends people into the church to attack the church. Because we as people understand what it is to have a desire. We know that we want to do things, and sometimes we're not allowed to. So when someone in the church says, actually, these rules don't really apply, you can do it anyway. Sweet. That's just what I needed to hear. Or we get to take advantage of the rules, and we say, we're better than everyone else. We are holy, the church. The world should be condemned. They're unholy. We don't want them in here. And we get to condemn the world. We get to judge the world and even other believers. And Satan is more than happy to do this in the church. Because if Satan wanted to kill the church, he wouldn't deceive them. He would stop at division. He would divide and divide and divide and divide and divide and divide everybody up until there's no one left to gather as a church. But he doesn't stop there. Instead, he sends people in to make a self-righteous and condemning church, or an unrighteous and church that revels in their own sin. He sends these people in because Satan doesn't want to kill the church. He doesn't want a dead church. He wants a hollow church. Satan doesn't want a dead church. He wants a hollow church, A church that instead of being focused on serving Christ, on serving Jesus, the entire church is focused on serving themselves, serving the empty cavity within them. Fireside, friends, this is spiritual war. And that means the enemy is not going to be comfortable taking a load off while we gather here on a Sunday or on a Wednesday or on whatever day we have our group and we gather as a body of believers. He's not comfortable letting us gather and worship God. He hates that. He hates it so much. Will said that, and Chris said that in his story. He doesn't want us to do that. So he sends these people in to divide us, to divert us, and deceive us. So what do? We need to watch. We need to avoid and be innocent, remain innocent. We need to watch for the people in the church who serve their own appetites, who want nothing but to serve themselves. We need to watch for the people who cause divisions, who separate people. We need to watch for people who use smooth talk and who flatter you to get what they want, to puff themselves up, or to continue on in their sin. We need to watch for these people. And after we've watched for these people, we need to identify them and avoid them. Remember what Paul said. He didn't just say avoid them, he said lean away from them. It's not enough to avoid eye contact. It's not enough to avoid conversation. Leaning is a physical action. If someone was right here, if one of these people serving their own appetites was right here, I have to lean away from them. I have to be physically distant from them. I cannot be near them. They're dangerous to the church. So after we've watched for these people serving themselves, after we've identified them and we've avoided them, the most important step is to remain innocent. Paul tells us that we need to be wise, to know what is good, and to be innocent, to avoid doing what is evil. And we have to do both. We have to do both together. If we focus only on avoiding evil, on avoiding doing evil things without knowing what the good is, we won't even know what we're trying to avoid. And that makes us into the naive people that are easy to deceive. On the other hand, if we forget about avoiding evil and we just focus on knowing what the good is, this is going to creep back up. We know what's good, but it doesn't really matter if we do what's evil, because we know what's good. And this is how we turn into the very people that serve our appetites. We need to know what is good and avoid doing evil both. And Fireside, we need to do this as a church. We cannot do it alone. If Satan is coming to attack the whole church, then the whole church needs to be prepared. It's not just the job of the pastor. It's not just the job of the preacher. It's not just the job of the worship leader or the old church ladies or whoever else. It is everybody's job to be prepared. Everybody needs to watch. And we need to help each other watch for the people who cause divisions, who use smooth talk, who divert attention away from serving Christ. And we need to help each other avoid them physically. We need to help each other be distant from these people. And lastly, we need to help each other be innocent. We need to help each other identify what's good, to know what's good, and avoid doing evil. So that if we know what's good and we avoid what's evil, We can call out the deception for what it is and sidestep it. Friends, it's not an easy task to watch, avoid, and be innocent. But as we watch and avoid the people who serve themselves, and as we remain innocent, we will see what Paul says in verse 20. We will see that the God of peace will stop Satan in his tracks, him and his plans, and he will crush him under our feet. It sounds really nice that it's our feet, but that doesn't mean that it's our victory. God is the one crushing Satan. But we do get to see it firsthand. He invites us into that victory. So, Fireside, we need to watch, we need to avoid, and we need to be innocent. And that is how the church will not be overcome. That's how we keep the church safe.